Okay, we're recording. Welcome. As you can see, it's a little chilly here. It's May. We've run out of wood. It's a little chilly, so I'm wearing some extra clothes. So today I have in mind that we can talk about standing out from the crowd. So humans seem to be a herd species. I don't know if you've noticed this. We're not like we're not like panthers. You know, panthers. You may or may not know this. Panthers are they're not particularly social animals. I think a lot of large cats are like that. Lions are an exception. Maybe there are some other large cats that are social, but for the most part, I think large cats are loners. Humans are not, right? We don't really do well on our own. So that's fine. That's not a problem. But it can be a problem. So, you know, for example, I don't know if this is true about lemmings, but it's a good image. It's one that we probably all are familiar with. The idea that a lemming, which is a type of animal, lemmings will go in a group and follow the leader, and if one goes off the cliff, the rest will go off the cliff. I don't know if this is actually true, but like I say, it's a nice image, and we can see that that's one of the possible pitfalls of being a herd species, is that if we just follow the leader, we don't know what the result will be. Generally, it's been reasonably successful, right? I mean, humans are pretty successful species as far as it goes. I mean, we'll see what happens. Maybe it won't work out so well in the end, but up to now, humans have been quite successful, and we're still here. There's a lot of us, so there's something successful about the human experiment, we could say, as a human species, as a herd species. But okay, here's the question. This is the, I don't know, $1 million question. If somebody wants to send me $1 million for asking this question, I'll let you know how you can do it. Actually, you can do that at joeylott.com/give. Although, if you're going to send $1 million, let me know in advance. We could probably work something out so taxes would be better. But this is the question. How well is it working for you? Are you satisfied being a herd animal? And here's the thing about being a herd animal, and this is the part that almost certainly, well, actually, let me just see a show of hands, maybe. If for those of you who have your cameras on, thank you. It's nice to be able to see your faces. But for those of you who have your cameras on, can I just see a show of hands? So raise your hand briefly so I can see if you're completely satisfied with being a herd animal. It's okay if you are. I don't have a judgment about it. I'm just curious to know. Okay, got one maybe. Either that or it's the Queen of England waving. Yeah, there you go. So maybe either you're not satisfied or you're slightly afraid. You're slightly afraid to stand out from the crowd. We had one person who was willing to stand out from the crowd with a maybe. Here's the thing. So do you notice in yourself a tendency to not want to stand out from the crowd, to not want to call attention to yourself, particularly attention that you perceive might be unwanted or negative attention. I mean, the answer to that is obvious, right? It's unwanted or negative attention. You don't want it. I'll have to look at that. Okay, there's a message that flashed across the screen, and I don't have to. I'm going to choose to look at it because it was interesting. So it says no, and in my efforts of differentiation, I still refer to the herd parameters, but knee-jerkedly go against. Yeah, great, thank you. So here's the thing about this is something that's been very interesting to me for a while, is concern about other people's opinion. Isn't that an interesting thing, that we're concerned about other people's opinion? If you're not concerned, if you're never concerned about another person's opinion, could you raise your hand just so I know? It'd be interesting to know. Okay. Whew, talking to the right crowd. Okay, so this interest that we have, this sort of attunement to other people's opinion, is interesting to me. I think it should be interesting to you too, because this, from my perspective, is really at the heart of a lot of our suffering. I won't say that. That's going down a different direction. But let's try to stay on topic. Okay, so if you find that you have an interest in other people's opinions, particularly their opinions about you, maybe you can start to see how unpleasant that is. So I've been curious about why this exists, because it doesn't actually seem to be beneficial for us presently. Maybe it has some benefits. Maybe it has benefits, but it has benefits maybe at an earlier stage in our learning. So we need to learn this. We need to learn at a certain stage how to conform. Maybe that's useful. Sometimes I wish that kids would learn that earlier on. But we need to learn to conform, because we are herd animals. We don't exist. We are not loners. We can't actually exist without others. In the United States, we have and I don't know that this exists elsewhere. Maybe it does, but in the United States, we have this myth of the frontiersman, which is this lone man who goes out into the wilderness with his axe and his gun, of course, and it's just him versus the elements. That's a very strong myth in the American consciousness, I think, and it's a total fabrication. It's a complete lie, for the reasons that I just pointed out, which is that the frontiersman who goes out alone is going out with all of civilization at his back, because he's got his gun and his axe. He's able to mail order his stove. So the idea of this completely independent lone frontiersman is a total myth. It's a complete fabrication. It's not reality, but it's something that's in our consciousness. We somehow believe that that's going to be possible. So our reality is somewhere in between, though, because we can see what happens at the extremes. Okay, so the one extreme is we have this fantasy that's a total lie about the frontiersman, who's totally independent, and the total self-reliance. Okay, and then on the other extreme, we have, I don't know, I think we can see a lot of examples of that around us. Complete dependence without any awareness that there's any possibility of thinking outside the box, or seeing outside the box, or seeing outside of the herd mentality, that it's actually possible to be yourself. So one of my favorite quotes is a quote attributed to Oscar Wilde, and who is quite a character. And this quote is, "Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken." And I like that one because it's true. And so we can maybe look and see how we invest a tremendous amount of energy into trying to be someone else. So that, and why do we do that? The only reason we do that, because you don't do it for yourself, right? I mean, let's be honest, you don't do that for yourself because you don't care. I mean, you don't actually care. You don't want to be something other than what you are. But we make all of these efforts to be someone else because we perceive that we need to do that in order to fit in order to receive the approval, to to maintain the protection from the herd. Not from the herd, but you know what I mean. Hopefully you know what I mean. To continue to get the protection that the herd is promising us. And there have been, I read, and I don't remember what it was that I read, I don't remember the name of the article, but I read an article years ago about, it was a cross-cultural study of shame. I think it was shame. I think that was how they phrased it. I think it was, I'll use the word shame. And which is a closely related phenomenon, and one that I'm very interested in, because if you look at what is we've all experienced shame, probably. Just as an interesting, to me, aside, in English, we have the word shameless. And you might think, if you don't know, if you're not a native speaker of the language, you might think that shameless is a good thing. Sounds good, because who wants shame? Nobody wants shame, right? But to be shameless is generally not considered to be a good thing. We would say that about somebody whose behavior we disapprove of. We'd say they're shameless. It's not a positive thing. It's a negative thing to say that somebody is shameless. But anyway, this cross-cultural study was looking at shame, obviously, across many cultures, and what the authors of this paper suggested was that shame is a mechanism for maintaining the herd, because the lone human won't survive. So it's a very powerful force in our consciousness, in our bodies. It's in the memory. I'm sure it's in the cellular memory, because it's been reinforced over so many generations. So we experience this compulsive need, or compulsive desire, I should say, a compulsive desire to fit in, not to stand out, to be one of the herd, not to rock the boat, not to call attention to ourselves, not to speak up. And I believe it contributes significantly to our misery, because it's completely not satisfying. And so now I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say something that well, maybe it's an opinion, okay, but I'll say it anyway. I perceive that there is there are two, we could say two tracks, maybe more than two, okay. Let's just say there is a track of human evolution, and that human evolution track is the it's the safest bet in some ways. Maybe at this point, not so clear that it's that safe of a bet, but maybe, okay. But it's sort of like investing, okay. So if you're an investor, you want, maybe there are people who are into high risk investment, and then there are people who are into low risk investment. So some people, they want something, and if you get a government, I don't know what they're called, bonds. It's basically, you get something, it's an investment. You invest in the government. This is true in the United States. I don't know if this is true elsewhere, but in the United States, you can invest in the government. You can give the government money, and the government will repay. They'll promise to repay that plus interest in the future, and that's promised. So you know exactly what you're going to get, as long as the government doesn't renege. But the interest on that is usually very low compared to what kind of interest you could get if you were to invest in some sort of high risk startup, right? I mean, if you were to invest in I don't know about these days, but years ago, in some sort of Silicon Valley startup, you could get insane returns on that. I mean, just absolutely extraordinary returns, but of course your risk is extremely high. I mean, I was involved in I've been involved in a number of startups over the years, and years ago, one of these startups, not in Silicon Valley, in Southern California, this was during the .com boom. So anybody who had an idea of any kind, who could put that on paper and who could get in front of somebody with money, could get investment. We got $1 million, and then a year later, that money was gone, which is maybe better than most. You know, maybe a lot of them, it's like 6 months, 3 months. So this was a year. But you know, those investors never got anything back because the money disappeared, and it was done. It was just over. There was no more. It was done. So so when I paint it that way, maybe it doesn't seem so great. But anyway, here's what I'm saying. There's the track of evolution that is tied to the human experiment. And so if you're the kind of person who likes to invest in government bonds, if that's the right term, maybe that's the track for you. You see what I mean? Maybe that's just the track for you. Maybe you're just content with that, and you'll just let it ride and see what happens. And this is good, because this is good for you if you're that sort of person, because you don't have to do anything other than just continue to conform. I mean, it's like, that's the beauty of it, is that if you want to just go for a ride on the track of human evolution, all you have to do is just continue to conform. Easy peasy, done for you. And maybe over time, I mean, there are plenty of books written by people who, investment books, okay? I'm not into investing all that much, really, to be honest with you, but since I'm on this subject, since I brought it up, I'll continue to run with it. There are a lot of investment books that are all about that kind of approach. Low and slow. You know, you just, as long as you can manage to save money and get some kind of interest on that, compounding over enough time, that will work out, right? I mean, if you're trying to accumulate, then that over enough time, that will work out. So if you're just placing all your bets on the human evolution track, then as long as there's enough time for that, then you're likely to get good results with that. But the question is, do you have enough time? Probably not. So then there's this. So then there's a second track, and it's the track of. Let me see, what should I call this? This is like, see, it's not exactly rogue. That would be like cancerous. It's not really rogue. It's like leapfrogging, so that we can leapfrog on the track of human evolution. And but think about, so if maybe you don't know what leapfrogging is, so I should just explain that. Most of you probably know, but sometimes maybe somebody doesn't know. So leapfrogging means it's like game. Okay, so you need at least 2 people to play leapfrog. One person, you both pretend to be frogs. Okay, it's been a long time since I played leapfrog, so if you have a different understanding, you can either correct me or keep it to yourself. It doesn't matter. But here's the version that I'm going to tell you about. So you have to squat down, and like, you know, I could just demonstrate it to you since I'm here. Okay, so like this, like a frog. Okay, and then one person is like this, and then the other person puts their hands on that person's back, and then they leap over that person like a frog, and then you can just do that. Okay, so leapfrogging. So we can leapfrog on the track of human evolution. To leapfrog on the track of human evolution, we have to become conscious of everything. So if we just are placing all our bets on the track of human evolution, we don't have to be conscious of anything. In fact, we can't be conscious of anything. If we're conscious of anything, we're going to screw it up. So if you want to just put your bets on human evolution track, you gotta just go all in on that, and then just remain unconscious, because otherwise you're going to be, if you become conscious, you're going to be well, freaking out, most likely, because you start to become aware of the how what's the right word? I can't think of the right word. It's very, the best word I can come up with at the moment is tenuous. The whole thing is so tenuous that when you become conscious of it, if you are continuing to try and ride out the track of human evolution, you're probably not going to be able to do it. It's going to be very, very stressful. Because what I mean by this is, if you really, so we go about our lives and we pretend like everything is fine and it's all under control and it's all orderly, all makes sense. I can predict what's going to happen. I know who I am. I know where I am. And then when you really start to open your eyes and become aware of what's really going on, just at a, just talk about like at a physical level. Let's look at what's actually going on. Okay, so you think, okay, you probably woke up maybe in your bedroom this morning, and you think, okay, I'm in my bedroom and all is well. I see things seem to be relatively still, but in fact, I can't even imagine how fast we're moving. It's so inconceivable. I mean, this planet is spinning around its own axis, okay, for one, at speeds that are inconceivable, right? I mean, you can't fly a plane around the Earth fast enough to be able to spin faster than the Earth, or move faster than the Earth is spinning. So the Earth is just the Earth. Just the Earth itself is spinning around so fast, it's incredibly fast. I don't know. I could Google it. What, you know, at this average surface, a point on the surface of the Earth, how fast is that point moving? There you go. 1,000 miles per hour. So that's just the Earth around its own axis. Oh, and by the way, the Earth is also spinning around it's orbiting the sun. You don't even need to tell me how fast that is. That's much faster than what the Earth is spinning around its own axis. So both of those are going on. Try combining both of those, and already your mind should be blown, right? If you just construct a mental model of this and you imagine the Earth spinning around and it's going like this, should blow your mind. But we're not done, because the sun, which is the center of our solar system, is itself orbiting around the center of the galaxy. Probably even faster than the Earth is moving around the sun. So now three movements all combined, you know, all these things going. Wait, but we're not done, because the galaxy is also moving around something. And we don't know, maybe that's moving around something. I don't know. Now, that's not even, that's just the beginning. That's just the tip of the iceberg, because that's moving, we could say, outward. Don't get hung up on what's out and what's in. It doesn't matter. I'm just choosing arbitrarily a direction. Let's say that's outward. Then there's inward. Same thing also happening. I mean, the electrons orbiting around the centers of all the atoms inside of all of the cells. So incredible amounts of movement happening. And we thought, no, I got it all under control. It's just another Tuesday, and I'm gonna do my whatever I got to do on Tuesday. So when we really start to wake up to that and see what's really going on, and then there's another component, right? Because that's just space. That's just three-dimensional space that we're talking about. That movement. There's also in time, right? We have a sense of ourselves moving in time. So then we add in a whole other dimension. And go ahead and try it. Pause time for a moment. Can you do it? So there's an incredible amount going on, and I'm sure we could be here all day uncovering more and more and more and more of the unthinkable, totally mind-blowing reality that is actually occurring. And all of that is totally, it's completely taken care of for us by the track of human evolution. If we choose to throw our hat in and say, yeah, I'm all in. So we can become like that character in the Matrix movie who just says, you know, it actually just, you know, make me rich, and I'm going back into the Matrix. We can choose that if we want. We can do that, but the problem is that we're not actually that satisfied with that. Because in order to do that, we have to there's a sacrifice that we're not actually, yeah, we have to go to sleep. That's right. There's a sacrifice that something within us is not willing to make that sacrifice, because it's a sacrifice of ourselves. Now, we don't know what we are, but maybe all the more reason why we should be extra cautious before we're willing to just throw that away, because maybe you don't know what it is you want to throw it away. Maybe you're throwing away gold. So so briefly back to this thing about shame. So so the shame works because, okay, I want you to just imagine, because maybe it's a little harder for us to imagine unless we put a little bit of effort into it, because most of us are, you know, we live in a largely global society, and certainly in many of our cases, I mean, certainly in the United States, which I can speak about because it's my experience, for sure, we are allowed to perceive that, well, we're allowed to perceive whatever we want, to be honest. You know, we're given great liberty to imagine whatever we want and indulge any fantasies that we want about what what life is and who I am. And we can play out a lot of those. But if you imagine where humans have come from, not that long ago, you know, just a couple hundred years ago, you can see that to be outcast from your society, to be outcast from your community, to be outcast from your family is, for the overwhelming majority of human history, is a death sentence. So what we are facing is this intersection of what the conditioning, the human condition that has been evolving, has been founded upon. This has been like the I don't know what to call it. It's not quite right to say that it's like it's been this. It's not the skeleton of what it has been to be human. It's more like the scaffolding, but we've mistaken it for the skeleton, because it's what has allowed for this experiment to occur, is this scaffolding of shame and conformity, because it says, don't leave the herd, stay with the herd, conform. And this has been useful, as I say, as far as it goes, but we're not satisfied with it. We're not happy with that, because we're not happy. We're not happy continuing to blindly suffer and not even, well, that's in the word that I use, blindly, but I'll elaborate this, or I'll be redundant by saying to blindly suffer so that we don't even know how we're doing the suffering. We don't even know why we're suffering. And we start to struggle with the effects rather than recognizing the causes. So we become very focused on the effects. So we turn shame into the enemy. We turn shame into the enemy so that we want to avoid shame. And we think that shame is bad. We should avoid all experiences of shame. And we just blindly then act to conform. But we're selling ourselves piece by piece. We're selling our the gift of our life. You know, this life has been gifted to us, and we're squandering that. I believe at this point, when we continue to indulge that the kind of behavior that we've been indulging to conform and avoid shame. So at this point, there are a couple of things that you might be thinking in regard to what I'm saying, right? I mean, you might be thinking, I have no idea what Joe's going on about. This is just strange and weird. And if you're thinking that, that's makes sense to me why you would think that, because I don't even understand myself a lot of the time. But another thing you might be thinking is, okay, so what do I do? Maybe you're with me. Maybe you say, yeah, I get it. I completely understand. I'm with you. I don't want to be victimized by shame any longer. I don't want to be selling myself so that I can continue to pay for the pay whatever is required to get the promise of protection offered by the herd. There's something about that experience which is there's something about that experience that is so deeply unpleasant and unfulfilling that I don't want to continue to do that. So if you're seeing that, if that makes sense to you, then the question would be, well, then what? And if you've ever had, so there's a subculture, probably worldwide, I don't know, definitely in the US, there's a subculture. It's I'll call it a punk subculture. Okay, so the punk subculture is a culture in which it's a rebellion against the herd. Okay, so that's one way in which there are people who have this recognition. They look and they see and they realize, wow, yeah, this is miserable. I don't want to do this. I don't want to end up like I don't want to end up like I see people ending up. I don't want to be, have be a slave to some job and have a mortgage to support some some total facade in some suburban neighborhood where I'm drinking myself to death and my neighbors are drinking themselves to death, but we all pretend like we're not. We go to church on Sundays. They see that and they say, no, I don't want that. So then they rebel and they say, well, if in order to be accepted, I have to cut my hair a certain way, then I'm not going to do that. But I'm going to go beyond that. Not only am I not going to cut my hair that way, I'm going to go out of my way to make my hair look offensive to people who think that that's the right way. So that's a possibility. But then we could see, does that seem to work out so well? I'll let you form your own opinions about that. I have my opinions about that. So my opinion is I don't see that it doesn't solve the problem. That's right. Because it's only actually a reaction. It does take courage. But the problem is, in order to do it, there aren't many loner punks. So you have to form your new herd. And then you have agreement within your new herd about what's the right way. So here's another possibility. Another possibility is one in which maybe nobody would ever know. Maybe nobody would ever know what's going on. Maybe nobody would ever know that you see what you see, or that you're doing what you're doing. Maybe your hair, you still get your hair cut. You're undercover. So it's not to stand out, to call attention just for the purpose of, woohoo, look at me. It's to be willing, this is the possibility I'm proposing, is to be willing to simply not do anything other than what's needed. I would say that's exactly, maybe that right there. I've never formulated it that way, but that seems to me one of the clearest descriptions that I've ever come up with, actually. Because I'll forget about it. I'm sure I've already forgotten about it. What did I say? But it's not to try, and it's not to call attention to yourself, but it's to be willing to allow for whatever attention comes to you, and to allow whatever attention does not come to you. To not do anything other than only what is necessary. Because if you do this, this is I would say actually radical in the literal. Is that literal? It's close to literal. I don't know. It depends on how you understand literal. It's true to the meaning of radical. Okay. So what does radical mean? Radical, the word means root. So maybe we don't need the word radical. Maybe we just say, yeah, getting to the root of things. But we'll use the word radical. It sounds better. So a truly radical approach is one that it's not a reaction to, the herd, nor is it a mindless lockstep indulgence of what the herd says. It's not really thinking for yourself either. It's not that kind of thing. It's not, I'm going to form my own opinions, because so what? You know, an opinion is just an opinion. The opinions don't really satisfy us either. So the truly radical, a really truly radical approach really is to get to the root and then change from there. If we don't come back to the root, then, you know, if something's going way off course, so I say, you know, hard to determine what's off course, but let's just say something goes way off course, you don't want to correct that way out here. You want to correct that, you want to come back. And so that's what I'm saying. That's to really truly be radical, is to say, wait a second, I don't know for sure about any of this. And to see that everything that I can do is going to be based upon the existing habit, the existing conditioning, which is doing this. You see, because once it's doing this, it's too late to do this. All that's possible now is to react from here. So anything that's a reaction to this is not radical. Anything that's a reaction to what has already been, not radical. For it to actually be radical, you have to come to the very beginning. Start fresh. And then I say you can piggyback, or leapfrog rather. Okay, so to leapfrog means, look, the human evolution has given you this wealth of knowledge. So to be clear, we're not trying to ignore that. We're not trying to fix it. We're not trying to get around it. We're not trying to subvert it. We're not trying to do anything with it. We can actually just see it for what it is, and we can receive it for what it is. And that's right. The point is, yeah, it's not for its own sake. I mean, we don't need to be radical. That's right. We don't need to be radical for the sake of being radical. That's more like the punk ethos, right? That's just, you know, let's just smash stuff and burn stuff and kick people and call people names, because that's radical. So it's just radical. It's like missing the mark. It's like, you know, like, it's close, kind of. You're kind of in, but no, you missed the mark. Sorry, because then we become fixated on just, once people get accustomed to my hair, you know, maybe at first I say, and I apologize to the people who are in the punk subculture. You're probably disliking everything I'm saying, but you know, whatever. You can, I'm not really picking on you that much, but it's a good point, which is, and we can all recognize this in ourselves too, by the way. But you know, if I say, well, the whole goal is to be radical, whatever I think that means, then as soon as whatever I'm doing becomes normalized, then I say, well, now I've got to do something different. So I'm just reacting. I'm always reacting. And what I'm proposing is something different. What I'm getting to here is this possibility of not needing to react to it at all, not needing to change it, confront it, fix it, solve it, figure it out, understand it, but to finally just stop wrestling with it, just lay it down, and then to actually start to look for ourselves, to actually see what's really here. And when we really look for ourselves, we see that the entire, and this is kind of what I was getting at with the talk of the Earth spinning around its own axis and all of that, is that when we really start to look, we see that this is absolutely, completely unknowable in the way that I have become accustomed to knowing, because the way that I've been accustomed to knowing has boundaries to it. It's fixed, it's boxed in, it has parameters. It's something where it's a play. You know, if you consider any play, any game has rules, it has a setup, it has parameters. Otherwise, it's not a game. That's just chaos. If it's going to be a game, you have to have parameters. And so what we can know in the way that we're accustomed to knowing is something that has parameters. It has a start, it has a beginning, it has a setup for it. And that setup is, and you can look, and this is what I was getting at, is the setup is we wake up into it, right? You wake up, and straight away, what happens? Straight away, you're say, oh, the world's out there. Who am I? Oh yeah, I'm me. And what day is it? It's Tuesday. What do I have to do on Tuesdays? And you're right in to that game without recognizing that's what it is. So to this truly radical approach we don't need to smash the game, right? We don't need to smash anything. We don't need to be up in people's faces, and it's not like that. This is not like Christianity. We don't need to convert everybody. Sorry, I didn't mean it like that. I didn't mean it like that. I'm not anti-Christian. Maybe I am. But the truly radical approach is not that. It's nobody would know that you're doing it. Or here's another possibility. Another possibility is they will know you're doing it. Either could work, but it's not because you're going out of your way to impress upon people how radical you are. The point is that you just are yourself. And I'll also say, I think that perhaps, just so, I just want to clarify this, because I don't think that, it does not seem to me that what I've suggested about the path of human evolution is entirely fair. There's one thing I want to clear up, which is it does seem to me that traditionally there has been traditionally many cultures have valued both conformity and being yourself. So I think there's a possibility of both. There's a possibility for both to coexist successfully. But what I do see is that very much in our modern culture, modern society, at least in the United States, that the conformity is actually we emphasize conformity, and we might, it's like so many things, we, on the face of it, on the television commercial, they'll say, so that you can be uniquely you, and celebrating your uniqueness and all these things. But we don't actually believe that, do we? We know that they're just selling us something. And what are they selling us? They're selling us something mass produced. It's not for uniquely you. It's just, I'll appeal to your idea of your uniqueness so that I can sell you something mass produced. It's not unique at all. So I'll just wrap this up with one more thing before opening it up. So then the question is, well, how do I do that? I mean, I don't know if that's your question. That would be my question. I mean, if I was to follow up to this point, I would say, okay, I can see, yes, I have this compulsive desire, compulsive behavior to conform. I'm dissatisfied with that. I can see that anything that I would try to do to fix that would be itself just more reaction. So what is possible? What can I do differently? How can I actually discover this possibility for myself in my life? How would that actually look, and what would that be like? So my proposal is, first of all, just start where you are, because you might notice that the habit is to try and concoct a plan for the future. What do I need? What materials do I need? Do I need some, it's like going back to school, and you need to have your glue and your box of crayons and your number 2 pencils and all of these things. I know probably not anymore. These days you probably just need, well, these days you don't go to school. You stay home with your tablet, but whatever. Back in the good old days, had those school supplies. So we can maybe start thinking like that. Okay, what do I need to do to prepare so that I can do this right? I like this idea. I like this idea of radicalness. I like this idea. I'm not sure exactly what the benefits are, but sounds good. I'm tired of the constant drama of trying to conform, constant worry about what do other people think? Do they approve of me? What if? All of these different scenarios that I worry about. I'm just tired of that. I can see the misery of that. I want something new. This radical approach sounds maybe appealing, but no, I don't know where even to begin with that. And so first is just start where you are. You don't need supplies. You don't need to go buy anything. You don't need to read anything. You don't need to learn anything. You don't need to study anything. All those things maybe are helpful, maybe, especially if you buy my products, which I'll be letting you know about after this webinar. No, it's nice that some people laugh at my jokes. Thank you. Where was I? Yeah. So just start where you are. You don't need anything except for what's already available, and what's available is what I would call. So I could go. I mean, if you've tuned into any of these, I could go on and on and on. So I won't do that. I'll try to make it as brief. So, but I just want to say this is the brief version, and this is if you can really hear this and make use of this, this is kind of all you need. But in order to actually make use of it, you have to. It's an exploration. You have to take it and then really explore. You can't. It's not the kind of thing where you say, it didn't work. Because sometimes that happens. A lot of the time that happens, right? I'm sure you've had that happen many times. You get kind of excited. You get the new book, the new workbook, the new training, the new meeting, the new whatever, and you get kind of excited. Ooh, this is going to be it. This is going to be the thing. This is good. It's going to work for me. And then you get to the end of the book, or the end of the training, or the end of the whatever, and then you say, it didn't work. And then you say, okay, on to the next one, because the next one will do it for me. Well, I mean, hopefully you can see that's not working out so well. So there are millions of different ways that we could point to this same kind of thing. And there are millions of different little nuances or tricks or techniques or whatever that you could use that could be beneficial. But the problem is that if you, I'll tell this story, and some of you have heard me tell this story before because I've been telling it recently, but it's not the most entertaining story, but it's, I think, illustrative. So there's a guy who wants to build a bridge across a river, starts building a bridge, gets halfway done with the bridge, and then he realizes, oh, I don't really, you know what, actually, I want a covered bridge. This is in New England, so he's you know, I just really want a covered bridge. So it'll be picturesque. So he abandons the first bridge, starts building his covered bridge, gets halfway through that one, and he says, you know, gosh, this covered bridge business, this is way more work and more complicated than I thought. Actually, I just want a simple bridge. I want a very, you know what, I want to build a bridge of metal and concrete. Just going to do that. And he starts on that bridge, gets halfway done with that one, and actually, I don't want that kind of bridge. I want a different kind of bridge. Goes on and on and on and on. So the guy's got a million half-built bridges and not a single bridge that goes all the way across. So this is what you don't want to do. You don't want to do that, because if you do that, you just have a million half-built bridges. You only need one bridge. You don't need a million of them, but you just need one that goes all the way across. So if you hear this one thing and you really are persistent in your examination of this, this is the complete bridge. Okay, so it's not, I'm getting a look. Yeah, it's the complete bridge, because it's not complicated. You see, like if your goal is to get across the water, you can stand on one side and you can gather. Okay, here's the thing: you gather with the herd on the one side, and then all the people tell their different stories. And you got the old timers, and they say, "Oh yeah, I remember when you know, Jimmy back in the day, he was ambitious. He was going to cross that river, and Jimmy drowned." And you know, and somebody else says, "Oh yeah, and I remember Sammy. Sammy was ambitious. He was going to fly across, but Sammy crashed and died." And so you can hear all these stories from people about what doesn't work, what does work, how there's nothing possible, how there is something possible, what's on the other side, there's nothing on the other side. You can hear all these stories. And then you start getting it in your mind that it's really scary or complicated or difficult or all of these things. And in fact, if your goal is just to cross over the water, then there are a lot of ways to do it. A lot of ways to do it. And all you need is one way. So, you know, as an example, okay, so for I grew up near the Mississippi River. It's a big river. If you've never heard of it, you can Google it. Mississippi, Mississippi. And so I grew up near St. Louis, Missouri, which is fairly far south along the river, and by that point, it's a very wide river. It's also been there are levees and dams to also manage the river, but nonetheless, it's a very wide river at that point. So, trying to cross over the Mississippi River in St. Louis, maybe it's a little bit more complicated, but in Minnesota, a little further to the north, at the source of the Mississippi. I haven't actually visited the site, but there is a site, you can step across it. I don't know if it's like starts from a spring or what, I don't know, but you can just step across it. So why am I mentioning this? If you want to get across the Mississippi River, you could step across it. You just got to go far north. But if you just have to pick a way. If you say, I want to step across the river, then don't get distracted by building boats. Don't get distracted by building planes. Don't get distracted building bridges. Just go north until you get far enough north that you can step across it. Then you've accomplished your goal. But if you decide, actually, I want to fly across, then don't bother going north. What's the point? And so you can hear lots of people telling you giving you different advice. Somebody will say, the only way to get across the river, you got to go north. So then you say, well, gosh, I've already started building my plane. It's awfully heavy, but I guess if they say so, I've got to go north. So you say, okay, I've got a bigger problem, because now I've got to get all of my plane pieces, get them far north. So I've got to get trucks and all this stuff, get all my stuff up there. But you see, it's not necessary. It's only, you think it's necessary because you've overcomplicated it. So if you just hear any one way, and you just don't confuse them and mix them up, you just stay with one way, it'll work. It's not complicated. It's really not complicated. It's so simple that that's where we get hung up. So here's the thing. Okay, now that I've said all of that, I'll see if I can remember the thing. So if we really want this to live this radicalness, not just for the sake of saying, oh, I'm radical, but to actually really live it, then the only thing that's necessary is honesty. That's the only thing that's necessary. So how can we be honest? So because the problem is we don't know. Yeah, right. So if you want relief, the only thing you need is honesty. If you want peace, the only thing you need is honesty. If you want freedom, the only thing you need is honesty. If you want to be done with suffering, the only thing you need is honesty. Because suffering is, we need to see what it is that we're actually talking about, right? Because again, we're all of the things that we're struggling with are actually reactions to what we've inherited. We've inherited the human condition, or the human conditioning, and all of our suffering is a reaction to that. So someone says, hey, your hair looks funny. And then you have a reaction to that. Your reaction is, it's a reaction to your inherited conditioning, which is it's going to be likely for most of us to swing one way or the other. One way will be, oh my God, I'm horrified that somebody didn't like my hair. I'm gotta go fix it. That's one possibility. The other possibility is, yes, all right, I'm radical. They didn't like my hair. I'll go tell my other punk friends about it. But neither of those is honest enough. So what I'm proposing is something that's more radically honest, which is to actually look and see what's really going on. So in this situation, and I know it's a very, who cares really these days about what people say about their hair, okay? But maybe you can just substitute a different scenario for what I'm saying. Maybe one that's more hits home for you more, but so you can really understand this. But I promise you, whatever the scenario is, this fits. So you can see if you substitute your scenario for the hair scenario, you'll see it fits. So somebody says, "Oh, your hair looks funny." So what would be radically honest would be to see what is actually going on and what is actually needed. Because if my habitual way of doing it, which is going to be on one side or the other, is going to require some kind, it's going to be some kind of action on my part. It will be a reaction on my part. I will be doing something. I will be either worrying and trying to fix something, or I'll be trying to prop up my new identity as the person who doesn't care, which of course is a total lie, because I do care. I just care so much that I'm flipping it around. So the radically honest way is just to really look and see what's actually going on, because the conditioning says, the conditioning gives us the parameters. You see that? The conditioning says, if somebody doesn't like my hair, that matters somehow. That's what the conditioning says. But if I'm radically honest, I see what's actually happening. Well, that person made some noises. I'm feeling things. Is there anything more that we could say about it? I mean, if we're really honest, is there anything else? To me, that's it. That person made noises. I'm feeling things. So then the conditioned, yes, that's yes, exactly. So the conditioned mind might come up with all kinds of other things to add in. They might say, how dare they? It's not fair. I am attractive. They don't understand. They have ugly hair. I don't care anyway. I don't like that person. It's going to come up with all these things. And because your whole life is constructed around all those things. So you have plenty of examples of all the things that the conditioned mind can come up with to contribute to that, to try and blow it up into something more. But the radically honest, clear seeing is that all that's happening is that person is making noises. I'm feeling. All that I can actually really truly know in this moment. And I can just quietly observe. And if I wish to, I can actually observe. I'm not proposing this is necessary, but if I wish to, I could observe all of the thoughts that occur, and I could do that until I'm satisfied that none of those thoughts actually have anything to do with anything, and they're not useful. Or I could just take it on faith that's true, and then I get to this point sooner. But either way, I can get to the point where I just realize I'm done with that. I'm just done with it. That and you'll notice that some of the last, probably, I mean, I can't say for sure this will be the case for you, but you may notice that some of the last thoughts that seem to be important are thoughts about how if you don't give attention to these thoughts and you don't indulge your compulsions, that it will mean that you're a bad person. And depending on how strong that conditioning is in you, you could go so far as to imagine that you'll turn into Adolf Hitler if you aren't constantly concerned about what everybody thinks about your hair. But if you just continue to look and see honestly, you'll see you don't there's so little that's required of you. It's shocking. I mean, you could just observe in your day how much is actually required of you. I'm not talking how much you think is required of you, because you think a lot is required of you. I think a lot is required of me. You know, and I'm telling you all of this. I'm 100% living this inquiry every day. Okay, so I'm not telling you this from some transcendent place where I'm speaking in the past tense and I say, I used to be a member of the herd, but now I'm transcendent. I'm telling you this from living this inquiry every day, and living the benefits of it every day, and knowing the truth of it every day, and knowing that it's reliable every day. And here's the beauty of it, is that I don't have to, and you don't have to, worry about whether something will go away or not. Because if we are resting on our laurels, as they say, and we say, look at me, I'm transcendent. I used to be a member of the herd, but now I've transcended. Well, great, good for you, but watch out, because you could trip and fall at any moment, and then you might find yourself in a bad situation and not know what to do. So I think I'm a big advocate of living inquiry, because the inquiry takes care of all of that. All that's required is just to be honest. That's it. If you just continue to be honest, you will always correct course, always. Because, and the question is that vigilance exhausting? No, God, no. What's exhausting is all of the fight, all of the struggle. That's what's exhausting. I don't use the word vigilance, but I know that's a word that others use. And I know some of those people. And it's fine. It's a fine word. I don't have any problem with it. And I may use it someday, and maybe I do sometimes use it. But it's the thing about it is that vigilance that word does have a little bit of a charge for some people, because it tends to suggest that we're, wide-eyed, is like forcing ourselves to stay up at night, and that somehow it would be exhausting. And this is the opposite. Yeah, exactly. Don't let the candle blow out. And this is the opposite. So this is just about seeing honestly all of the ways in which I exhaust myself. Because when I'm concerned about what other people think about my hair or my opinion or whatever, when I'm concerned about that, which is all the time, that's the conditioning. So I mean, please understand, if you think, well, I don't care, I don't believe it. Of course you do. All of us do. All of us care a tremendous amount. It's in the human conditioning. You inherited it by being born. It's not something that there maybe there are some few people who might be termed sociopaths. Okay, so it's a diagnosis that a person could receive. Maybe some of those people don't care. I'm not sure that I believe that, but maybe some of those people don't care. But for the rest of us, for sure, we care. So that's exhausting. That's just bone crushing, exhausting. It's the kind, I mean, it causes a person to not want to live anymore because it's so absolutely horrible. It's so draining. It's so miserable to be constantly struggling with, am I getting it right? What do other people think? Do other people approve of me? Am I succeeding? Am I failing? All of these things, which are, you can see, have absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with anything. I mean, just complete, utter nonsense. That I say is complete, utter nonsense, but it's a function that served its purpose and can serve a purpose. But when we take it at face value and we believe our thoughts about it, then it's just absolutely wrong. It's just horrible. And so what we can do instead, yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Actually, thanks for bringing that up. Yes. So that's a very, very good point and a very important point. So let me just read that comment so that people who didn't see it will have the benefit. It says, I believe the nonsense in my body, even as I suspect mentally that it is nonsense. And that's a very, very good observation. And I think that that's a very useful thing to see, because I had that experience. I can't remember exactly the first time. It was happening. It was happening for years before I actually was able to do anything useful with that insight. But it was actually torturous for a long time. But I remember having that insight, and I would be just tortured. I mean, I would be lying in here's because I had these very paranoid delusions that I struggled with, even though I knew that they weren't true. So, for example, I would many years ago. I won't give you the whole backstory. It doesn't really matter. But I would get water delivered to my apartment, and in 5-gallon containers, and I would become afraid, and I would have paranoid thoughts that somebody had tampered with the water in some way, and so then I would dump it down the drain. And a lot. This happened a lot. Oh, 2 out of 3. Okay, yeah. And so I knew that it was crazy. And that's just one example of so many that were going on concurrently. I mean, I had so many of these. So I had plenty of opportunity to look at this, and I saw exactly that. I saw that I know this is not true. I know it's not true. I know nobody did that. Why on earth would anybody do that? That's the most insane thing. Definitely didn't happen. And even if it did, I have absolutely no way of knowing one way or the other. So if I'm going to drink any water ever, it could be poisoned, but I need to drink water. So this business of continuing to indulge these paranoid fantasies and dump water down the drain, this is crazy. But I saw that what was actually going on was underneath all of the thoughts that said, yeah, I know that this is crazy. There was something in the body that was, we could say it was almost as if it was screaming in terror and saying, no, I'm afraid. So this is a very, very good point, because we'll often, this is what we'll see. If we're really honest, we'll see that I know that, for example, I know that it doesn't matter if somebody likes my hair or not. But like we all probably all of us here, maybe not though, but probably all of us can recognize, at least on some level, that whether somebody approves of our hairstyle or not is just doesn't matter. Okay. And yet, if somebody criticizes our hairstyle, we may find that we're having strong feelings. So when we notice this happening, this is, to me, is a very useful insight, because what it points to is that there's actually a disconnect. Or let me rephrase that. There's a connection that's incorrect. There's a connection that's being made in the nervous system that's incorrect. The nervous system is saying this story and this feeling go together. And then if you say, well, I'll get to this, well, no, I'll say it so I don't forget about it. So we'll say this feeling and this story go together. And then if you can see that the story is actually not true, then here's what the nervous system will do. It will modify the story, or it will substitute a different story, and it will say, okay, this story or this modified story and this feeling go together. And it will keep doing that until you finally agree. You'll say, you know, because if my mind, for God knows why, but if my mind had said that purple space aliens are inside the water waiting to attack you, I probably wouldn't believe that one. So, but there was the feeling, and the feeling was my reference point, and I was trying to come up with a story that would explain the feeling. So that one didn't work. So my mind would say, okay, forget about that one. How about this modified version? And then it keeps doing that until finally I say, oh yeah, that might be it. So if we see that that's what's happening, we can see in any situation what's actually happening. There's sounds occurring, movement occurring, feelings occurring. That's what's happening. We don't know anything more than that. Then nervous system trying to be helpful says, I've got a story to explain that. Here you go. And if we are not observing carefully, then we'll just go along with it. We'll say, oh yeah, that must be true. And the logic that we use is, well, the feeling, I feel this feeling, therefore the story must be true. You see? I feel the feeling, therefore the story must be true. No. The feeling is not proof of that the story is true. The feeling is happening independent of the story. The story actually is not about the feeling at all. The story doesn't have anything to do with the feeling. Nothing. Other than it's coincidence. That's it. So in our conditioning, we have paired stories with particular sensory experiences. And so when sensory experiences similar to those that are paired with the story occur, then we are primed to accept that that story is a reasonable description of what's going on. Whereas in fact, it's not an accurate description at all. It's just a story. Okay, so there's a couple comments here that I'm going to look at, and then I'll open it to. And I know the screen, my picture is frozen when I'm looking at the chat, so don't worry. Okay, so let's see. Let's see. Okay, yes. So yeah, one comment about vigilance suggests a self-policing state. Yeah, just doesn't have to, but yes, that's maybe why I don't usually use that word. And then there's from in here, it felt like I had the feeling when you criticized my hairstyle. Yes, and that's the important thing that I was making with that last point, is that when things occur simultaneously or closely together in time, the nervous system, which is wanting to be able to predict, wanting to be able to find patterns, will associate those things, or will be likely to associate those things. They are not otherwise linked, but we perceive that they are. We perceive that they are connected only because we've made that association. This is actually, I can't think of a really good example to demonstrate this, but this is in the somatic work that I share with people. This is one of the things that I really like about it, is that it can demonstrate principles. Yeah, that's right. Decoupling is the name of the game. And so the somatic work can really help to illustrate a lot of these principles well. And so you can, and like I said, I don't have a good example. Maybe I'll come up with one and I'll send it out in an email someday soon. But our movements, so all of our movements, all of the patterns of movement that we have are conditioned. And a lot of the time, not a lot, almost always, out of habit, we have inefficient patterns, but we believe that those are correct. We believe we're doing it in the one way to do it. So if I say anything, if I say, we're sitting in the same room, and I say, could you hand me that? And you would reach and you'd get it, and then you'd reach to hand it to me. You would think that you're doing it the one right way. That's what you would think, because that's what your nervous system produces that illusion for you, which is nice in some ways. The only problem is if it's not actually efficient. Well, let me rephrase that. The only problem is really if it's terribly inefficient, which it usually is. And so we have all of these things that are coupled that really needn't be. So it's actually, so this applies to anything. Anything can become coupled in the nervous system, but in the context of this talk today, we were looking specifically at stories and feelings and how those get coupled. But patterns of movement, all of these things anything can get coupled. One story with another, one feeling with another, all these different things. So but we perceive that as we're blind to it as being inefficient. We don't even know. We're not even aware of what we're doing. So if we're reaching, it's encoded in our nervous system with a story that's just reaching. That's it. We have no awareness of how we do it. We might be doing it in the stupidest, most painful way conceivable, but to us, we think, well, I'm just doing it. And I don't, the reason I experience so much pain is because life is just painful. We don't know that we're doing it. So the radical honesty is to just see what's actually happening. And that seeing is what decouples. The seeing requires, okay, so the seeing is effortless. The seeing is happening, but in order to recognize the seeing, to consciously see, requires slowing down. And it requires, going back to the root. So it's just, if we're way out here on this limb, then we see everything from that perspective. And because we're way out on the limb, we feel insecure. So we're working overtime, trying to get feeling of security and safety and balance and okayness, but we're way out on the limb. So we want to just come to the root. We want to just come to centeredness, just come to stillness, and then just observe and tell the truth and just see what's actually happening, and you'll notice the conditioned mind will protest. It will throw a fit sometimes because it will say it's not fair. There's got to be something. What am I going to do? I've got to do something. And that's why I say that if you're just persistent in your commitment to this one way of radical honesty, it works. It's just most people aren't going to be. I was like trying to do two things at the same time. Now I forgot both. So anyway, but that's probably a good reminder to shut up. So let me see what oh my goodness. Yeah, it's a good reminder to shut up because my kids are going to be back in a moment. But let me look at that. Seeing like a baby, perhaps with nothing added from the mind and its years of seeing practice. Yeah. I mean, for sure, it is like that. If you imagined, which would be closer to the truth than what you normally imagine, if you were to imagine yourself as a baby and that helpless and that not knowing, then that instantly produces this radical honesty, because the radical honesty is not something that you have to overlay. The radical honesty is just not in the absence of the overlay. I mean, radical honesty is totally obvious because I don't have to try hard to figure out what's actually going on. It's obvious what's going on. The overlay is all about trying to figure out something, a hidden meaning behind what's going on, right? It's like, what's going on? Well, that person made sounds, I'm experiencing feeling. That's totally obvious. You don't need to do anything for that. That's totally obvious. All of the effort goes into, well, what does it mean? What did they mean? What should I feel? How should I react? That's all of the effort is in all of that, which is totally unnecessary and all fundamentally based on some game parameters that are not actually the root. It's like we were given some parameters for the human experience, the human condition, and we were told, okay, play out the game in this way. But we get to choose at any point if we're not satisfied with the parameters of the game. And actually I'll just, this will be the last thing I swear until somebody asks me something. But no, that's definitely the last thing because I'm not even going to say that. So thank you. I'll open it up to you. And as usual, I'm recording this. It will go up on YouTube. It will be available publicly. So if you do not wish to be in the public video that will be on YouTube, don't speak. But if you have a question and you don't mind being in the video that will be on YouTube, then all you have to do is unmute yourself and speak, or you can use the chat feature in Zoom to type your question or comment. And we've got another 15 minutes or so available if anybody has anything. And if not, we can all, yes.
It appears like no one's speaking. Can you hear me, Joey?
I can hear you, yeah.
Oh, that's great. Well, I guess first of all, I would just like to say thank you for this meeting today, and also hi to everybody. You know, it's I really don't know where to begin. The chat function I find a little bit easier because it's a little bit less public. But that, you know, what you're pointing to, I mean, the exhaustion from participating in the conglomerate that has been handed down, and I mean, you spoke earlier. I sure hope I can get to a question quickly, but I kind of want to. I'm just glad to sort of engage with you and everybody here. In my own case, there was a time a long time ago when it was like, okay, so I don't want to participate in this inherited conglomerate of misery creation. I didn't become a punk. I tried to leave my civilization to the extent I could. And then it was like, oh, I'm gonna be somewhere. You know, it's not gonna. I'm not gonna change my name. I'm not gonna ditch Western clothing. But I haven't been able yet to. There's a way in which I feel like I'm in a little bit of a holding pattern, not having figured out. I mean, I'm filled with admiration for you having endured what you endured, that you make reference to a lot, and the extremity that it seems like, you know, and to have found your way to that decoupling practice, to put it, to name it one way. I mean, that's the hope of that. I mean, my brain makes a story about what that's like, and I'm like, oh, that strikes me. That's kind of Zen, to be able to sort of reject the stimulation of, being criticized by the world for my haircut or whatever. But the possibility of no longer being sucked into the, I'm still definitely enduring the conditioning.
Yeah. Well, the question is why?
Well, I guess it's, I definitely, at the beginning of today's get together, you pointed to the whole sort of, you could make the decision to be like, okay, I'm just going to rely on human life to free me at some point 20 lifetimes from now, and then the only teacher, and which is maybe another way of saying, I'm going to rely on suffering to do the job by itself. And I certainly suffer. There's just no question. I feel my experience of my life is that I, for some reason, have not seen my way clear to the
It's
solution
not,
or something.
right. And it's not really true.
Okay.
I feel confident saying that to you because we've had communications in the past. So I wouldn't necessarily say that to everybody. I think that, okay, so I don't remember exactly when this was, but I had an experience somewhere between 15 and 20 years ago, in which I was given guidance to on how to not just not grasp any thought. Let's just put it that way. Okay.
I've recently been given guidance that way, and I keep grasping anyway.
Yes. Okay, but here's the thing. So I received that guidance, and I had an essential experience of that. So it's sort of like riding a bicycle. Okay. At first, it seems maybe hear rumors of somebody riding a bicycle and can't really understand what the hell that means, and then maybe see somebody riding a bicycle and that blows your mind, and then somebody says, well, a lot of people learn to do this. Actually, pretty much anybody can do it. You could do it. And then try to do it. Maybe don't have much success. But then there's this essential experience of, oh, I'm balancing on the bike. Now, once you have that experience, as they say, you never forget how to ride, right? Once you learn how to ride, you don't forget. But that does not mean that after the first time you balance on the bike, you're going to be Lance Armstrong.
Okay.
Okay. So that essential experience is essential, but then the question is, what are you going to do with it? And this is the reason I mentioned the story, is that I had that essential experience, and then this was while I was having all the paranoid water fantasies and all that stuff. I kept doing it. I kept doing the things. I kept
doing the paranoid
suffering. I kept
stuff.
doing the suffering. I kept indulging that.
Conditioning.
So, yeah, I just kept doing it, even though I had this essential experience, but I didn't really trust it enough. I didn't really. So it was like the guy with the bridge. I didn't really trust that was going to go all the way. I heard rumor that maybe I needed to fly a plane across, so I started building a plane. And so this is what it's like. We hear these rumors of things, and then people want to know, okay, well, is this one better? Is that one better? Which one's the true one? Should I be going to this person? Should I go to that person? Which teacher should I trust? Which technique? Should I meditate? Should I not meditate? Should I do this kind of meditation? Should I do that? And, people go, I remember when I first learned transcendental meditation, um, which was about 20 years ago, and there was a guy in the group who had received his TM initiation like, I don't know, 30 years prior or something. And so I was early 20s, he was in his 50s. And I remember thinking of having all of my judgments of people as I do. I had judgments about this guy, and I was like, I don't want to be like that guy. I don't want to be 55 years old and having been meditating for 30 years and still be just as ignorant as he seems to be. And but you know, this is what we do. That's the thing, is we're given something, and I'm not proposing that TM is the way or a good way or anything. I not at all. Although I must say that my criticisms of TM really are more of the organization and maybe less about the technique itself, which is, it's hard to really have something bad to say about just sitting quietly for 20 minutes. But anyway, I built many half bridges, just like that guy obviously must have been doing. So I would not the main thing is once you have an experience, this essential experience where you recognize that you don't have to grasp your thoughts, or you recognize that you have this capacity just to be still. You have this capacity simply to observe. You have this capacity to simply be consciously aware. Once you have that experience, that essential experience, then it's just a matter of, in some ways, repetition isn't quite the right word, but it's close enough. Repetition. Repetition is clarifying, because it helps to, every time you repeat, you can get clearer on what's not needed. Because again, the conditioned mind is looking for patterns. It wants to know, how do I do this? And so if you allow it, it will take anything and it will invent a pattern, and it will insist that that's true. But if you repeat it over and over and over, what happens is you start to get clearer on what it is not. So you see what's not necessary. You see that it's much, much simpler than you think. So because ultimately with any of these things, whether you're talking about TM or you're talking about anything that has any possibility of helping or working, all that they're doing is leading you to discover the simplicity of it. You strip away everything that's not necessary, because you continue to repeat it, and you see through the repetition, you see, well, what's actually needed, what's essential. Mm-hmm. And you realize, oh, that thing that I thought was essential, that wasn't actually needed, because this time when I repeated this, I discovered that I didn't need to do that thing that I thought was necessary. That we have all these little things, these habits of things that we do that are unnecessary, but we thought they were necessary. So the more that we repeat it, the more we repeat these kinds of inquiries, the clearer we get on what's not necessary. And pretty soon we see that really all that's necessary is just this radical honesty. That's it. If we just continue to come back to what's actually happening.
Thank you so much. You know, I for some unfathomable reason, my internet connection cut out in the middle of your response just now, so I didn't hear everything that you said. I'm going to go back and look at the meeting later on, okay, when it's up. But thank you very much for.
I'm sure it was the most brilliant thing I've ever said.
You know,
I mean,
possible.
I know that's hard to believe because everything I say is so brilliant, but thank you. It's a good question.
Thanks.
So I see it's almost, so I've got 3 minutes to noon. Anything else before we wrap it up? Okay. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here, and see you next time. Bye for now.